Phantom Fighter for the Nintendo, the NES, is one of those highly obscure games that if you were to line up 10 average people, none, I'm convinced none would say they've ever heard of it, let alone played it. Of course, if you're in the right circles and you ask people who are, video game aficionados or whatever, they've probably heard of it, especially collectors. I'm sure they've heard of it. It's relatively inexpensive in today's standards, considering how popular retro video game collecting has been over the last few years. So some people in certain circles have heard of this, but I would say most people have not. It's a game that, although it's highly obscure, it is super profound and memorable to me. I can't explain to you why exactly, because it's not the best game I've ever played, but it's one of the most memorable. And I try to sit here and I try to deduce as to why, and I can't come up with a solid answer besides, to me, it was just a good game. Great game, actually. I think it's definitely above average. Good game would be, an average game. Well, anyways, it's based off of a movie called Mr. Vampire that came out in the 80s. And I've never heard of this movie or whatever, but I heard it was like a box office success. I don't even know if that was in the States or in China. I think it might have came out in Japan. Was it Japan? No, it's in China. And apparently it's a great movie and it's very memorable for lots of people. So this is a video game adaptation of that movie Mr. Vampire, that popular movie Mr. Vampire. I've never seen it, but it's on the list. Now that I'm learning more about it, I'm like, I think I'm gonna watch it pretty soon just to see if I see anything that's closely related to like the source material in the video game. But it's classified as a beat 'em up, which kind of like mystifies me a little bit because I can see why it would be classified under a beat 'em up, and I think that's the correct category to put it under. But it doesn't feel like a beat 'em up. It's definitely you punching Chinese vampires that are called Qianchis or Kyanchis. Kyonchis, I'm gonna call them Kyonchis. Is what I've always called them. So they're these Chinese vampires that, I don't know, they wear like this traditional garb, and in this game they're all like they all have they're all color coded. Like the really fat, slow ones that hit heavy are red. Like the sprinty, fast ones are like pink. The tall, lanky ones are like a pale green or like a green. So they're all, and then you've got flying ones too, flying witch like vampire. It's very weird. A witch vampire. I guess that's what the game classifies it under. So it's a little confusing. But when I saw that it was classified under beat 'em up, I was like, sure, yeah, okay, that sounds right. But it's not. Believe it or not, to me, it's more strategy. It's more strategic, because like when you think of a typical beat 'em up, you think of like your guy or girl or robot or whatever your character is playing as. You're just moving from left to right of the screen usually, and you're just beating up. Your combo and is usually a combo oriented, like canned animations. Like you just walk up to your enemy and then you just keep pressing the tab button, and he does different attacks with this tab button, and you usually just kind of stun lock them for a bit. Unless there's an enemy or something, they can break out of those stun locks and like hit you. So you have to be more strategic. But like you think of like Shredder's Revenge, Streets of Rage, Final Fight, Captain Commando. You think of all of these, Double Dragon. You think of all of these iconic, and also, these they basically are the template to what a beat 'em up is, at least a good beat 'em up. And Phantom Fighter doesn't fall under that. Not under that category, not because it's a bad game, but because like I said, it's more strategic. So like you move from left to right like a traditional beat 'em up, and you kick and you punch and you attack your enemy or whatever, but there's no stun lock. There's no It's not an easy game. It's more strategic since the only attack, or mostly, so like the flying Kianchis or the flying witch vampires, they're in the air. So you kind of have to like jump up and kick them, and you have to like punch them as they're flying by you. So they're a little more different, but the bulk of the fighting would be on the ground. And these Kianchis have one singular attack for the most, but they just hop and hit you. That's all they do. They hop from left to right or right to left, and their hops can be short hops, they can be long hops, and they don't do anything else. They don't kick, they don't do any type of crazy spinning attacks. They just hop. So you have to find the correct placement. You have to kind of like estimate their distance, the distance that they're going to hop to, and you have to kind of get a few paces in front of that. So you miss their attack when they're hopping towards you. Then you turn around and hit them with a kick or a punch. And sometimes they'll short hop you and throw you off your game. So now you got to kind of, you lose your footing and you kind of got to like start all over. You got to be real strategic about it. And that I can see why people would be turned off with that type of gameplay, but it becomes pretty fun because the more you play, the better you get at it. So especially when you see the color of the zombie, or sorry, the vampire, once you see the color of it, you can go, okay, I know what's the typical range this particular Kianchi jumps in. So I'm already there. I'm already at that strategic place. So I'm kicking, punching. And not to mention that it is an RPG also because, you eventually get better moves. You go to, there's 8 towns that you go to, and each town, I believe, has a training hall where you can learn special attacks, whether that's punches, dodge out the way, double kicks, turn kicks, high jumps, double punches. You can do this one particular move where you can crouch walk, and that kind of helps to get out of their way or whatever when they're hopping, although they can still hit you if you're crouching, if they land in this specific spot that you're in. So it is, you level up, and eventually you can kill these Kianshis with just a few hits if you're, powerful enough, if you save up enough scrolls. Scrolls is the currency in this game. So every time you kill a Kianshi, I believe you get scrolls. It's been a while since I played. I think that's the way it goes. And you collect these scrolls, you go to the training hall, and you give him these scrolls, and the guy teaches you some moves. But then you have, I believe, before you can actually purchase any moves or get trained for any moves, you have to do some trivia, if I'm not mistaken. And the trivia sometimes was like of the pop culture of that time, and sometimes it's about martial arts, and it's very weird. But it's kind of cool though because he just won't teach you outright. You have to actually pass these trivia checks, and then you can get trained, if I'm not mistaken. So I don't know if the scrolls bypass that. I can't remember too much, but I do remember that even as a child, it left a profound effect on me because it wasn't like any other game that I played. Like you had Mighty Final Fight, you had a couple, you had Double Dragon, you had Double Dragon 2, The Revenge is my favorite Double Dragon of all time, and to me that is the beat 'em up of all beat 'em ups. You've got the final fights that come later on. You've got the Captain Commandos. So many Maximum Carnage. Separation Anxiety. You've got so many cool beat 'em ups that came later on in the Super Nintendo. But in the Nintendo era, to me, honestly, in general, Double Dragon 2, The Revenge is the number one beat 'em up for me. I've played and finished that game so many times. I've become like a pro at it. So to me, that's still a better game than Phantom Fighter. But Phantom Fighter it's just one of those like there's like the music on it. Of course, it's chip tune, so I can't sit here and like praise the music. I can say the old cop out for its time. It had great music, and I would be right, but at the same time, it's like it's hard to hear in the year 2023. It's hard to go back to 1988, 1990 and judge a chip tune song, a chip tune track. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you kind of have to use a lot of imagination. But maybe it's the music, but I always find myself humming tracks from this game. Like, throughout the years, just randomly, one of the tracks from this game would just pop in my head and I'm singing it out loud. And I'm pretty sure people have wondered, well, not singing it, more like humming it. And people probably have wondered, like, what the fuck is that? But that's how memorable it was to me. And not to mention that when I was a kid, man, I was probably maybe 6, 7 years old when I first played this game in the early 90s. And I remember in the front cover, it was the titular titular character, whatever. The main dude, his name is Kenshi, I believe. And it, if you hear a bunch of thumping and drilling, they're doing some sort of work in my apartment building, and not the most ideal time, I guess, for me to record this, but bear with me. So in the cover, the actual cassette, the gray cassette that you would have for the Nintendo of Phantom Fighter, the cover art would show Kenshi throwing this high kick with like Kyonchi's in the background. And I remember I was talking to a friend. I went outside and I had the tape in my pocket because I wanted to go over his house to show him how cool the game was. But he was outside talking to some girls, and there were the girls that lived next door or whatever. So I thought, like, hey, what's up? We can play later. Yeah, no problem. Like, and I was like, well, I've been playing this cool game. And so I throw a high kick, and I threw it so high that I fell on my back and I fell into like this dirt pile that was next to this tree. And the girls started, they just erupted in laughter. They thought it was the funniest thing. One of them thought I did it on purpose. I was like, I was so embarrassed. And played it off like I pretended like I meant to do it or whatever. And they're like, dude, you're like dirty. You're covered in dirt. You should go home and wash that off. And I was like, oh, okay. I'll catch you guys later. The weirdest fucking intro ever. Thank God I was like 6 or 7. I hope they don't remember that. And for some weird reason, I remember going home and running the bath, right? Like I didn't even take a shower. I ran the bath and then just filled up the tub about halfway and then got in with my pants on. And here's the best part. There were like purple jeans, like purple corduroy jeans. This is how you know it was the 90s because you could get away wearing shit like that. It was these tight purple corduroy jeans, and I was laying in my bathtub with no shirt on, no socks on, just these purple jeans, just filling the water with dirt because I guess in my mind I was like, hey, I can take a shower and clean these pants at the same time. I can't even explain to you what my stupid little mind was thinking when I did that. I don't even remember the rest of the story. It's just all I know is that I remember I got out and I wrung them out and cleaned them and hung them up somewhere. I don't know. I didn't come back outside that day. I kept on playing the game. Obviously, I was very embarrassed. But I do feel like if this game was reclassified, like maybe a strategic beat 'em up, I can't explain, but like if it was like kind of explained to someone, because there's lots of things. There like people enjoy things a lot more when someone explains it thoroughly to them. That's been my experience with many things outside of the video game world, in the video game world, at work, about life, about fashion, about money. And this goes double when it's a subject or a topic that you're generally not interested in. So, like for example, I'm generally not interested in like carpentry. Don't get me wrong. I think carpentry is awesome, and if you know that skill, good for you. That's an extremely useful skill. If this fucking civilization collapses, you want a guy who can build you shit or fix shit. So, and even if it doesn't collapse, it's still a hell of a profession. You can make a great living off of that. But that's not something I'm generally interested in. But if someone sat down and explained it to me in a nice, digestible way, like, hey, this is how you would, support a beam or put up a wall, or I'll be like, oh, that's pretty cool. Like, even though I'm not interested in it. So, like, what the fuck does this have to do with Nintendo games and me falling on my ass throwing a kick? I believe that this is one of those games that, like, if someone thoroughly explained to you what it, like, if you just say it's a beat 'em up, it's a Nintendo game, just play it. They're gonna be like, oh, this game sucks. You know what I mean? I'm used to playing better games, especially for someone who played Double Dragon, and I say, hey, this is another beat 'em up like Double Dragon. Oh man, they're gonna be like, this is not Double Dragon, bro. So like if someone was to thoroughly explain it, like, hey, listen, you have to be strategic. You can't just rush and beat them up. You have to like kind of find out where they're gonna land and hit them, then move out of the way. Like, I feel like people would enjoy it more. So when I saw it was under the category beat 'em up, that's what I was thinking. I was like, okay, yeah, I see. It's in the right category, but it also should be kind of like under a subcategory, a subgenre. I don't know if there's strategic beat 'em ups. Maybe that is a gaming genre. I'm not familiar with it, but it sounds like it could be. I mean, that Marvel Midnight Suns, right? Like, is that a strategic beat 'em up? Kind of. If you think about it, I don't know. Whatever. This game is just a game that I think about often, and it blows my mind because I'm like, bro, this isn't even the best game on the system that I've played, let alone one of the best games I've ever played. I like this game a lot. Like from a scale of 1 to 10, it's way above average for me. I would say like a 7, 7.5, maybe 8 on good days. It's that good to me, but it's also like not a memorable game, and it's also not one of the best ones I've played. So, but it's always there in my mind. Maybe it's a sickness. I should probably talk to somebody about it. But it also makes me wonder, like, what other things. Well, I know other people do this because I'll go online and like on Instagram or something, and I'll see somebody post up a picture of the sun or something. It's just some random shit, and then they'll have a caption that I'm not familiar with. Like it's obviously from a movie, from a show, and I'm like, I have no idea what that is. And then somebody would comment like, "Oh, that's from the 1984 movie, blah blah blah," and the character said that, and I was like, well, I would never have guessed that. You know what I mean? I've never even heard of that director. I've never heard of any of the actors in that movie. I've never heard of the movie itself. But it's cool that these things live like rent free in people's minds. And this is one of those games, Phantom Fighter for the Nintendo Entertainment System. This is one of those games that just lives rent free in my mind for a reason that I can't even articulate to you. But overall though, I just feel like it's a game that should be talked about a little more when it comes to like video games in general. There's barely anything about this online, and it I don't know, I guess it upsets me. Not upsets me. That's a way too strong of a word. It kind of baffles me a little bit because I'm like, I can't be the only one that sees it this way. I can't be the only one that sees this game as like a worthy game of a. I wouldn't say a remake because you would have to make it like 3D and shit. And I don't know how you would make a game like this 3D. I mean, there's a bunch of ideas and stuff like that, but and I'm sure people who work on like mods and they can take all of the assets of a Nintendo game and kind of just make them better, introduce new systems to it and stuff. What is that called? Like, is it Mugen? That's more for arcade, I believe. I don't know, but they take like assets from different video games and then make one big video game. Like they'll take like Street Fighter characters and put them in beat 'em up games, and I believe that's what it's called. And those are awesome. I had a friend who was into that or whatever, and he showed me a lot of cool shit you can do with the Dreamcast too. Apparently, at the time at least, when he was showing me stuff, the Dreamcast is very active in that community, and I was like, "That's pretty cool, man. That's cool." I can't get into it because I feel like it's way over my head. Shit, I'm having a hard time just like recording these and editing these. I'm not. I wouldn't say I'm a computer like illiterate. Like I know what I'm doing for the most part, but I'm not super technical with it. So I'm like I can't imagine taking assets from one game and then putting it into another game and then adding music and then adding effects and that sounds like I would have a seizure. As far as the game itself, it's a good looking game, like by its standards, by its day. Like it looks good. There's a lot of character dialogue. Some people may say too much, but if here's a trick: if you do end up playing Phantom Fighter, always set the text speed to fast. I believe you do that. I don't know how I remember this. I may be completely wrong. Like I said, it's been years since I've played this. I think you press select on the controller and it says text speed or something like that. Slow, medium, fast. Always put it on fast. Because if you put it on slow, oh man, or even normal, you're gonna have a hell of a time, bro. And not in the good way. You're gonna be highly upset. I've seen videos of people lose it. They say one guy, I saw a video just before I started recording this. He said it's like Metal Gear 2 that they give you a fucking lecture every time you're about to save, and I'm like, that sounds annoying. Call me crazy. I've played so many Metal Gears. I played mostly all of them, even some of them on the PSP. PSP, I believe it was Peace Walker. I believe it was called. And I understand where they're coming from. You know what I mean? Like there is a lot of dialogue. Some people love it, some people don't. I love it. I love reading shit. I love lore and all that. And Metal Gear has more than you can handle. What was my segue here? I never have a fucking segue, man. I was going somewhere with this. Where was I going? Oh, yeah. So the game looks good for, for a classic Nintendo game. You set the scroll speed to fast, and then just, you know, play the game. Take your time. You're gonna lose. You're gonna get that lecture by because you're always with your sidekick friend who can get kidnapped. I believe as the game goes on, which like there's layers to this game. It's just not a simple left to right quote unquote beat 'em up. Your guy can you're always with a sidekick who berates you every time you lose, and then you snap back at him in the next screen, and then you're out back to fighting Kianchis. But it's kind of funny how he gives you shit every single time you lose, like, like what a weak and pathetic master. I think that's what he tells you, and I'm just like, that's funny. Um, then you get a password or whatever, and then you continue playing the game. There's 8 towns, and you have to collect these three like Castlevania like orbs, dragon tears, I believe they're called. I don't remember very well. I think that's what they are. And after you collect these three, you can fight the boss of that town. Because basically, you're like a mercenary. Like people in the town are like, I think they're hiring you. I don't know if you're doing this shit for free, but you just travel from town to town. People are like, hey man, I'm glad you're here. Listen, we got a fucking vampire problem, bro. Use your kicks to take this problem out. Like there's a bunch of fucking zombies overrunning the temples, overrunning caves. We need you to go in there and just kick the shit out of them. You know what I mean? And he does it, for money apparently. And so you're this mercenary, and you have to collect these three dragon tears or whatever, and then you use those tears to, I think, open up a cave or wherever the boss of that town is. It could be a cave, it could be a temple, and you go in there, and it's usually a kind of like a marathon almost. You have to fight like 4 or 5 Kianchi straight, sometimes 3, sometimes 4, and then you fight the boss. So it's like you got to be really good to, end up finishing that boss or whatever. And I can't remember the ending of the game, but I think it was just more text. It's a text related ending, if I'm not mistaken. But it's worth a playthrough, man, if you have the right mentality going in. If you just zoom it and you're like, oh, this game sucks because, I try to punch this guy, stand in front of him, he just keeps hitting me. But it's like in reality, you have to be very strategic. And that's something that like I don't hear at all from people who cover this game. A lot of them. I found a video from like 13 years ago, and it seems to me like the dude was his angle was kind of doing like the AVGN James Rolfe thing, where he's just disparaging the game and just trying to be funny by saying funny shit or saying this game sucks and all that. Like I get it. At the time that was like the most popular thing to do when it came to retro video games. But it seems like he was trying a little too hard, and I was like, it was kind of turning me off. I wish it wasn't no commentary. I wish it was strictly gameplay. I should have muted it, right? That probably would have been the best thing to do. But the video was pretty short. It was like 5, 6 minutes long or something like that. So I bared through it. And he didn't mention that. He didn't mention like, oh, I see that you have to be like strategic and you have to stand on this side and then hit. And then, oh, once you figure that out, the game becomes. What the hell's that noise? Yeah, I think I'm hearing like banging sounds outside. So he didn't mention that like, yo, you have to be strategic. You have to be, you have to like wait till one zombie. I keep calling them zombies. Wait till one vampire jumps from his particular spot to another spot. You have to be there in time. And it sounds kind of confusing, but like if you play the game, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. You'll be like, okay, so you do have to be strategic, and I wasn't just talking shit. Like I said earlier, the movie was apparently a very successful one. It said it was a box office smash. I've never heard of it, but it makes sense because it was in the 80s. I think it was 1986 or something. The original one came out. I'm very interested in watching it just to see if like it's probably terrible. I got a feeling it is. I saw the cover for it. And it was like big heads. It reminded me of like that Jackie Chan game. Fuck, what was it called? That was another great beat 'em up. It was a Jackie Chan game for the PlayStation. Fuck. He like kind of had like a big head, Jackie Chan action stunts or some shit. I don't know what's it called, but it was great. It was a fun game, man. Um, it kind of reminded me of that, like the box art, or not the box art. Sorry, the movie poster art for the movie Mr. Vampire was like I think they had like big heads and like small bodies, and it looked like it was kind of goofy, but at the same time very heavy in martial arts, which is great for me. Those are my two favorite things: to fucking laugh and to watch people kick each other in the face. Which like speaking of kicking people kicking each other in the face. That's like another thing to go off on a side tangent, like I usually do. Like MMA has completely ruined these type of games and movies for me, right? These kung fu, karate, Shaolin monk type styles. Like when I was younger and I was growing up, like these were the styles to learn, right? Like if I ever were to learn Aikido was one of them. I remember I had a friend in high school who was heavy into like Steven Seagal and Aikido, and then once you got older, once I got older, you realize all that is bullshit. And I say that in the most nicest way. There is some practical use to it, but like Aikido and I would say karate, taekwondo, that's more useful because you actually learn strikes and how to defend yourself, and you also get combat experience, right? So like if you're ever in a actual fight, your experience, you go, okay, I know what it's like to strike, go blow to blow with someone, so I won't be as frightened or as scared. I'll know what to do. I'm trained. So there are practical applications to like taekwondo and karate and all that. Aikido, that's a hard one for me, man, because I'm like, I don't know how I can use this, if I'm ever in trouble. Like, so anyways, what I'm trying to say is that MMA has completely ruined this for me because now I can't enjoy these type of movies anymore. Like I can't enjoy kung fu movies anymore because I'm just like, okay, I gotta kind of suspend the belief a little bit. Like one of my favorite movies of all time, probably my favorite combat movie or action movie of all time is Bloodsport with Van Damme, followed by like Kickboxer. And watching that movie now, it's great. It's still a fucking great movie, man. But it can be very cheesy with the fight scenes because, like I said, I'm spoiled now. Now I know because of MMA what works and what doesn't, what styles, what disciplines work and which ones don't. And a lot of this shit that I grew up believing was like, this is the style of all styles, completely got debunked. And I'm like, oh, man, because with MMA, for those who don't know, like a lot of Kung Fu guys, a lot of karate guys, a lot of Aikido guys, a lot of these type of Wing Chun dudes, they in the early days of MMA, whether it's UFC or just, any other promotion, Pride, I believe, was a big one. A lot of these guys went to these organizations thinking that their style was the shit and they wanted to test it against other styles and they got their asses handed to them. They got fucked up. And then you're watching this, you're like, no, not my Shaolin monk. I had all my money on him. And this wrestler just took him down and just beat him lifeless. And it's like, now like, okay, this is a lot of bullshit, and you don't really, you see a lot of action movies and you see a lot of action movies nowadays, and it's a little hard to digest or whatever. But at least you have to suspend belief, right? Because that's what you have to do with movies anyway. You have to sit there and kind of suspend your belief and go like, all right, this shit ain't real, but I kind of got to buy into it and just enjoy the ride. Stop being so critical. And nowadays, I feel like if you make some sort of a kung fu movie or a martial arts related movie, you have to have an expert on there, man. You have to have like whoever the actor may be, whether it's some you know um A-list celebrity, B-list, C-list, whatever. You have to have some sort of a martial artist there on set to show him how to throw proper kicks and punches and how to roll out of the way. Like there are think people are way more critical now in 2023 with the advent of like the internet than they ever were ever like in history. Now it's there's there's any you can be critical on any single platform you'd like. You can be critical on so many social media websites, like you can make up your own website and be critical about it. Look at me, I'm being critical right now talking about a fucking, you know, 30 something year old game. So if you're gonna make an action movie of some sort, by God, please have some sort of a martial arts expert there and have the actor actually throw legit kicks or whatever, and punches and all that. But yeah, to finish the side rant is that when I was a kid, this type of shit, I gobbled this stuff up. I loved it, Kianchis and a kung fu traveling master, and then now I know that it's extra bullshit, right? Because in my mind, it just goes like, I know this wouldn't really work in a real fight. Now, I mean, it can technically, you can still strike if you know kung fu. You can, so you do have some sort, and like I said, combat experience that matters too. So, but like grappling is such a huge fucking part in fighting. People always are grappling, right? It's very rare to have a long fight or a fight of any sort, unless the fight is like finished within the first couple minutes or seconds where someone gets knocked out or just refuses to continue fighting. Fights are almost always going to end up in some sort of a tussle, some sort of a grapple, some sort of a clinch. And this is where the magic happens, right? So this is where wrestling and like jujitsu and sambo and these type of heavy judo, if I didn't say that already, all of these styles, this is what works, right? This is what you want to know, because fights are almost always going to end up in some sort of a close range grapple, and you want to know how to dump a motherfucker on his head, you know? Like, I believe it was Jordan Peterson, right? Yeah, I know he's a controversial figure. I like the guy personally. I feel like he says a lot of sensible shit. A lot of people don't. A lot of people think he sounds pretty whiny, and I can see that. He's almost like a real life villain almost, because he's really leaning into his his beliefs and his character, and he does kind of come off like that. He wears like these crazy, outrageous suits, which whatever. I listen. I like him. I do. I like him a lot. You got to understand that he is an actual psychologist, so he knows what he's talking about. Even though he can come off a little weird. But anyways, I remember he said one of the best lines I've ever heard, and he says, I don't know if this is what he said word for word, but he said, like, you have to be capable of cruelty, because if you're not, you will be subject to someone who is. And that's 100% true. Like, you have to be capable of hurting someone bad, because if you are not capable, if you're not capable of hurting someone bad, then you will be subject to someone who'll hurt you bad. You know what I mean? It's that simple. So like another classic one would be, it's better to be a warrior in a garden than a gardener in a war. That's another one you can take away from you in one of Danny's fortune cookies sayings. But it is interesting. It's interesting, with this critical like outpour. Like, it's just way more easier to be critical now. It's easier to disparage something. It's easier to tear something down, because that's people. It's a natural human behavior for us to remember the negative things, right? We're always looking, us as humans, we're always scanning for threats. We're always scanning for things to stay away from, things to be careful of, whether it's people, whether it's situations. And it's like it's like negative reinforcement almost. It's like that's how we survive, right? When we were our ancestors, they had to watch out for like fucking giant bears and giant cats, and you know what I mean? So it's like they were always scanning for threats, and I believe that's something that never left us as a species. We're still, even in a relatively safe environment that we live in today, like, we're still scanning for threats. So basically, this is a long-winded way of me saying that, like, negative things are more impactful than positive things. So it's people capitalize on this, right? You have news companies, news agencies and news outlets. They're always airing negative stories because they know those resonate with you better than positive stories. And YouTubers do this all the time. You go online right now, everything is sensational. Everything is sensation. Everything is, this person should have never said this, or look what this person is saying, or we hate this person. It's like that's what makes you click. Literally click on those, because you're like, your mind is like, I gotta know what's going on. Positive stories, they just get thrown out in the dust. Yeah, that was my sermon. I hope I converted you to my religion. Drink this Kool-Aid now. Give it a shot though. Seriously, not the Kool-Aid. Don't do that. Don't do that. But give Phantom Fighter a shot if you, even if you're not a I don't know, I guess a retro game player. It's a tougher sell for the younger generation, especially the ones who like to play a lot of FPS games and stuff. Like, there's no way I would be able to recommend this game in good faith. They're gonna be like, "What the fuck is this?" But if you're someone who's my age, I'm pushing 40, like, and you never got a chance to play Phantom Fighter, go in there with that mentality. Go in there with that strategic mentality, and hopefully you enjoy it. Um, Yeah, that's about it. See you guys the next time.